Okay, my pretties. I know I kind of haven't done, top 10 of my favorite movies in a while I did the top 10 favorite Teen Titans episodes, the regular Teen Titans, like the original, not the crappy Teen Titans Go. But today I thought I would go ahead and decide to do my top 10 favorite Muppets movies. Now, some of the Muppet movies that I will be listing in this video, some of them have been, I have talked about some of them in Shadows and Pretty, such as, the recent one I did, such as, the Muppet movie, Great Muppet Caper, etc. So, for those of you who have not seen, any of these yet, feel free to, check out the movies if you haven't. But today I thought I would go ahead and, get started on this, me ranking all of the Muppet movies fees in this video. Now, before I would like to begin, I would like to put a disclaimer saying this is just only my own opinion on these movies. If you disagree with me by any of them that I list on here, that's fine too, because I personally would like to say right now that I respect your opinion on these movies, and if you want to criticize any of the movies I listed, like if you didn't like them, or if there was an issue with any of these movies I listed, feel free to do that in the comments below. Anyways, I think we should begin with the first top on our list. So I want to state before I get on with my top 10 on this list and place it at number 10, we have Muppets Wizard of Oz. Yep, this is a television film that came out in 2005. And yeah, I can definitely say right now that not everybody liked this movie, and it's understandable. But I want to state right now, before I talk more about into this, is there is a total of 8 theoretical Muppet movies that have been released in theaters, and some of them were, and the rest were like released on, direct to video, etc. So, the Muppets Wizard of Oz is pretty much, basically, it's pretty much almost like the Frank L. Baum Wizard of Oz, story. And it's not really like, the 1939, story that, involved, Judy Garland, Muppets, etc. This Muppet movie is direct to video, and this basically is about Dorothy going to Oz. She meets Kermit, who is, the Scarecrow, Gonzo's the Tin Man, Fozzie's the Lion, Miss Piggy plays all the witches. I definitely have to say, I can understand not everybody likes this movie. I mean, the fact that Dorothy's persona is more wanting to go to Hollywood and just want to sit there and, do the, go to, do a concert and stuff. I mean, the CGI animation for, the wizards, pretty much designs when the characters come in, such as the one look like the dragon from Shrek, the, troll face, some lady or whatever. And yeah, this movie this movie is just one of those movies you liked as a kid, but then when you watch it as an adult, you can understand why a lot of people did not like this movie. It's an interesting concept. When I watched this as a kid, I liked it, but when I watched it for the first time as an adult in a while, I'm kind of like, yeah, it's a bland movie, but it's not terrible. But it's one of those movies that Ashanti was in, and it was the first one. But I could definitely say the movie's not terrible, but there's a lot of flaws with this movie. I even watched Jambariki's video when he did state, some flaws about the movie, such as the uncomfortable adult jokes that they managed to slip in there, which, I'm going to be honest, a lot of kids' movies like to do that. I don't know why, but they do. But, this movie's not perfect, but I give this maybe a 6 out of 10. I like the idea that they did a parody of The Wizard of Oz, but I wish it could have been a bit better. But that is just mainly my own opinion, though. But, it's not terrible, but I still place it in this for my top 10 because I'm going to say right now there's, some good stuff in there as well. So I guess with that being said and that being the case, what do you guys think of this movie? Feel free to let me know what you think in the comments below. And let's get on with number 9. Next up we have is Muppets from Space. So I did talk about the Muppets Wizard of Oz on Shadows and Pretties, I think last year, either 2020, 2021, or 2022. I can't remember when I talked about that one. But I know I have not talked about this movie yet. And that movie is, well, Muppets from Space. Now, this movie, I do remember watching it when I was a kid, and it was a pretty interesting movie, even though it came out in 1999. It's a really interesting movie. It's pretty much Gonzo wants to know about his species, but of course, he's been having dreams of being denied entry to Noah's Ark, and in his dreams, he begins to realize that he's just alone in the world. And of course, he's trying to find out, what kind of species he really is. Like, he's always wanting to know, and it's a pretty interesting story. I personally really like this story. I thought it was a pretty interesting movie. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to have this movie on VHS, and it was a pretty good movie. I mean, the fact that the Muppets go to space, it's a pretty interesting concept. I personally thought it was really neat. It does have the science fiction, feel to it when I first watched this movie as a kid, and I do recommend maybe watching this movie if you're a Muppet fan, but I definitely really gonna have to watch this movie again because I have not watched this movie in ages, so it does make me feel old now, come to think of it. But this is definitely a pretty good Muppet movie. I highly recommend you guys check it out. So, anyways, what are your opinions on this movie? If you like it, that's pretty fine. If you don't like it, I respect your opinion. Feel free to let me know what your thoughts on this movie is in the comments below because, I personally really thought this one was a pretty good movie. Now, I can definitely say that this one maybe not the best movie, but of course, it's a pretty good one. So, anyways, let's get on with the next one. Muppet Family Christmas. Now, this is a Christmas movie that I have to put on this list because this is definitely a pretty good Muppet Christmas special. This basically is involving, the Muppets crossover here over with Sesame Street and Fraggle Rock, and they basically go to this. Kermit and his friends go to the farmhouse to celebrate Christmas there with Fozzie Bear's grandma, and it's pretty awesome that I got to see, Fraggle Rock characters and even Sesame Street being crossed over in this. I honestly really like the crossovers they did in this one, and it's a pretty good movie, especially when I was a kid. I do have this on VHS, and I think it still works, but I also gotta really say it's a pretty good TV movie from 1987. So, with that being said, I recommend watch this during Christmas, along with another Muppet Christmas movie that I'm gonna put on this list later on. But I do recommend you guys check out this movie if you haven't. It's a good TV movie, and I personally thought it was funny. It's got pretty good moments, and even though it's like a 47-minute long movie, I still personally thought it was great. So, anyways, with that being said and that being the case, let's get on with the next one. Of course, we have the Muppet Movie. This movie I recently talked about in an episode, Shadows and Pretties. And this movie basically is one of Jim Henson's first movies that he produced along with The Muppet Show. This movie came out in 1979, and this is basically about Kermit the Frog pursuing a movie career and starts his cross-country trip from Florida to California. Of course, he meets people like Fozzie Bear, Miss Piggy, Gonzo, and etc. It's an excellent movie, and a lot of people have seen this movie when they were kids, and I highly recommend you guys watch this movie if you haven't. It's a pretty good movie, especially something from the 70s, but it's a pretty great film. And I mean, I watched it and loved it as a kid, and now watching it as an adult, I still like this movie. It was a pretty good movie, and I personally thought it was really neat and well made. I do like the concept. I thought it was a really amazing concept for a movie. especially with the plot line and stuff. I highly recommend you guys check out this movie if you haven't. So, what do you guys think of this movie? Do you like it? Did you not? Let me know what you guys think of this movie in the comments below because I personally like to hear what you all think. The next movie I have to put on this list is The Great Muppet Caper. I also recently talked about this in an episode of Shadows and Pretties as well, and this movie came out in 1981. And Nat in The Great Muppet Caper is pretty much about Kermit and Fozzie and Gonzo, who are going in an assignment to report on a British jewel East. Basically, they're going into England to find out, the person who is stealing the diamonds. A pretty good movie, especially for another Muppet movie after the success of the Muppet Movie. This is a really good movie, especially with the fact that, this involves Miss Piggy, becoming, pretty much in this movie, she's like becomes a model, and of course she gets framed for stealing the diamonds when in reality, it was someone else that did it, but just try to blame it on Miss Piggy, just so, they could accuse Miss Piggy of it. A pretty good movie of Muppets, to be honest, and I really loved this movie as a kid, especially with the fact that, it's got a great concept. Everything about this movie, it's just flat out awesome. I highly recommend you guys check out this movie if you haven't. It's a really good movie, especially from the 80s, and you will not be disappointed. I could definitely say right now that if you like this movie, feel free to let me know. And even if you don't like this movie, let me know in the comments below, because I personally like to hear what you all think of it anyway. So anyways, let's get on with the next one. The Muppets Take Manhattan. This is a pretty interesting movie, and it basically is about, Kermit the Frog and his friends start an act stage as they begin to take the show from their college town to Broadway. However, when the Muppets end up going to New York City, they have difficulty finding financial support for the production. So, the plot of this movie is pretty good, especially with, the movie being, about these guys going to Manhattan in New York. It's a pretty good movie, especially for young kids and adults alike. It's still a really awesome movie, and I personally thought it was a really awesome some concept for a movie. It's got a pretty good concept. It's pretty interesting and well made. I personally thought it was really funny. So, with that being said, and that being the case, I personally thought this was a pretty interesting movie, and it still is for what it is. It's a pretty awesome movie, and I highly recommend you guys check this movie out if you haven't. It's while it's still a pretty interesting movie for an 80s as well as the Great Muppet Caper, but I personally love this movie. I personally thought it was really good. So let's get on with the next one. And as in fourth place for another Muppet movie, we've got The Muppets. Yep, this 2011 movie. I thought this movie was pretty good. I mean, it's got pretty good acting. It's a really neat movie. Basically, one of the world's biggest Muppet fan named Walter is on vacation in Los Angeles with his brother Gary and Gary's girlfriend. They discover that greedy Tex Richman plans to raise the Muppet Studios on a drill for an oil spot. So they end up having to save the Muppets, such as Kermit to reunite with Miss Piggy, Fozzie, and the rest of the gang to try and take back the Muppet Studio. I really thought this was a pretty good movie, even though it came out in 2011. It's a pretty funny movie. I mean, when I first saw it, I thought it wasn't really the best, but now watching it again, I personally thought it was funny. It was a really good movie, and I personally loved it. So, with that being said, and that being the case, I highly recommend you check out this movie if you haven't. It's pretty good, and I do recommend any of you guys who are interested to, check out this movie if you haven't. It's a very awesome movie, and I really have to say that the plot of it is pretty good, and I personally enjoyed this movie. I found it to be very enjoyable. So, what did you guys think of this movie? Let me know in the comments below, because I personally would like to hear what you all think. The next up in the third list is Muppet Treasure Island. This movie is a really good movie that is pretty much a Muppets version of the Treasure Island story. which, I mean, adapted from the Treasure Island book. I personally remember reviewing Shadows and Pretties episode of this movie. Of course, we got Tim Curry, who plays as the villain in this one. And we all know who Tim Curry is. He's the same person who's, Home Alone 2, It, The Rocky Horror Picture Show. Oh, and he also was Ben Ravencroft in Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost. I personally really like this movie that has Tim Curry in it, and we all know Tim Curry is a pretty awesome, actor for a lot of movies. I personally really loved this movie as a kid, and I still watch it today, even though I'm an adult. And although it's got a pretty good songs, it's got pretty good scenery, and I like anything about pirates and fantasy world like this, because this is actually one of the best Muppet movies I've ever seen about the adaptation based on a storybook. And we got another one that is like that coming up in the next minute or two. But I will say right now, the plot of it is pretty good and pretty much about, the Muppets go on sale to find the buried treasure. I really do like that they cast Tim Curry in this movie, and I honestly thought Tim Curry played a pretty awesome villain in this movie, especially even though this movie came out in the 90s. It's flat out amazing. I highly recommend you check out this movie if you haven't. It's got pretty good movie. It's got good plot, got voice acting, it's got good acting, etc. I fell in love with this movie the moment I started watching this movie on VHS. Even as a kid, I personally really enjoyed it. I mean, they did a pretty good job casting Tim Curry as the villain, and I personally liked it. So, what did you all think of this movie? Feel free to let me know in the comments below, because I personally would like to hear what you all think. So, if you don't like this movie, I respect your opinion, and if you like this movie, I completely respect your opinion. So, anyways, I guess with that being the case and that being said, let's go on with the next one on our list. Yep, and this is another adaptation of a novel by Charles Dickens called Muppet Christmas Carol. This is one of the first Muppet movie that pretty much was made after Jim Henson died in 1990. This movie came out in 1992, and it's a Christmas movie based on the classic Charles Dickens movie called The Christmas Carol. Pretty much, we have Kermit the Frog playing as Bob Cratchit, and basically Ebenezer Scrooge, who is played by Michael Caine, and the other Muppets like Miss Piggy, Gonzo and Fozzie Bear, and Sam the Eagle. Pretty much, it's about, the Christmas Carol story. Scrooge is only caring about money more than anything else, and he is visited by free spirits for him to change his ways and show him the consequences of what would happen if he didn't change his ways. Personally, I love this Christmas movie. I thought it was a really neat Christmas movie. It has a good concept. I love the Muppets' take on this story, especially it's a Christmas movie. I used to watch this Christmas movie even on VHS when I was a kid, and I personally really fell in love with the movie. It was funny. It was good. I definitely really liked the characters and their take on these characters that they played as. I really recommend this movie, especially if you guys, love Christmas movies. I highly recommend you check this out. You will not be disappointed on these movies. So, I mean, I have this movie, I think, on DVD somewhere. It's probably in storage right now. So, yeah. If I ever find my DVD somewhere in the storage, I will be sure to, rewatch this movie. And I highly recommend anyone watching this movie if they're a Muppet fan, but especially for Christmas time. They will not be disappointed once they've seen this one. So, anyways, I think we should go on to number 1 of my favorite Muppet movie of all time. At last, we have a number 1 being ranked called Muppets Most Wanted. A pretty good sequel to the Muppets movie that came out in 2011. This one came out in 2014. It's pretty much a Dominic bad guy the Muppets' new manager, convinces the gang to embark on the world tour. However, when Kermit the Frog doubts if it's a good idea, a feeling is proven right when Constantine escapes from prison and pretty much takes Kermit's place and lands Miss Piggy's sweetie in the Serbian prison. So while the frog tries to convince his captors his true identity, Constant and Dominic are free to carry out their plan to steal the London's crown jewels. This is a pretty good sequel to the Muppets movie that came Muppets, and this movie, Muppets Most Wanted, was a movie I really enjoyed the concept of. You know, the villain in this looked pretty much like Kermit the Frog, except he's got like this, I think, freckle or something on his nose or whatever. But it's a pretty good sequel to the first Muppets, which I thought that one was pretty good. This one, Muppets Most Wanted, was definitely a pretty good sequel. I mean, watching it again for the first time in a while, I personally liked this movie. I thought it was a really good concept. I highly recommend watching this movie for those who like the Muppets. If you guys like this one, I highly recommend you go and check this sequel out. You will not be disappointed. The sequel is pretty good and it's a really awesome movie. So I highly recommend anybody who likes the Muppets to go check out Muppets Most Wanted. It's a really neat movie, and it's funny. The jokes are funny. Everything about it is just flat out amazing. It pretty much is like feeling to the greatest other Muppet movies that I've seen so far. So, and with that being the case, that pretty much concludes my top 10 favorite Muppet movies. So, if there's any Muppet movies that you like, you can let me know in the comments below. If there's Muppet movies you don't like, let me know in the comments below. But also one thing, if you happen to, dislike any of the Muppet movies I listed in this video, you are free to disagree with me because that's perfectly fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions in regards to these movies, and this is just my own personal thoughts. I'm going to give this movie pretty much the thumbs up. It's a good sequel to the Muppets. Muppets Most Wanted, I highly recommend you guys check this movie out if you haven't. So with that being said and that being the case, what did you guys personally think of these Muppets movies I ranked? Did you enjoy them? Did you not? Do you agree with me on them? Do you disagree with me on them? Feel free to let me know in the comments below. I'm the Lion Queen. I want to thank you so much for watching today's video. And if you're new to my channel, feel free to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you're new. Ring the bell for notifications to when I upload, so that way you guys will not miss an upload. And as always, I'll be seeing you all in the next video. Peace out. And like always, please roll the outro because I'm out.